So, cesarean section is indicated when vaginal delivery is contraindicated, or maybe vaginal delivery is not safe for mother and fetus. Now, let us look at some of the indications for cesarean section. There are certain absolute indications and there are certain relative indications. Absolute indications are the one where there is delivery by vaginal route is not possible or absolutely contraindicated vaginal delivery due to some other reason. Like there is a vaginal atresia, vagina is very narrow, or there is a previous repair of vesicovaginal fistula. So if you allow vaginal delivery now, this fistula may recur. Then in case of advanced carcinoma of cervix also, vaginal delivery is not indicated. Then there may be a very severe degree of contracted pelvis where it is impossible for the baby to deliver vaginally. So these are some of the absolute indications. Then there are relative indications like cephalopelvic disproportion. So in case of a borderline disproportion, sometimes due to the dynamic status of labor, due to very good contraction and due to molding or due to the give of the pelvis and good cephalic presentation with vertex as a presenting part, it may be possible sometimes baby to deliver through vagina. So it's a relative cephalopelvic, because if there is a deep flexion or not strong vaginal contractions or no proper molding, then it may not be possible for vaginal delivery and you may have to take the patient for cesarean section. Then another relative indication is previous uterine scar, and this scar is threatening to rupture. So if there is a threatened rupture of scar, then it is again cesarean section is required. Then sometimes multiple fetal pregnancy where the first baby is not vertex presenting part, or it may be bigger baby, or there is a fetal distress. Then some malpresentations like transverse lie or breech presentation where there is no external, in breech there is no external cephalic version is tried or not done and baby is big and breech delivery is not indicated. In these cases, or oblique lie, these are some of the malpresentation, or there is a compound presentation, maybe breech with cord, or there is a cord prolapse. These are some of the other indications. Then antepartum hemorrhage. In antepartum hemorrhage, if there is a central placenta previa, it may be for it, then you have to deliver the baby by cesarean section. In a marginal placenta previa, it depends on the baby's health and depends on how much is the placenta dipping in the lower uterine segment. So sometimes you can do artificial rupture of membrane and allow the baby to deliver vaginally. So these are all the relative indications. Then elderly primigravida is also a relative indication. If she has got some other comorbidities, hypertension or diabetes, then it may be not very much possible or not indicated for vaginal delivery, but everything is all right. It's a singleton cephalic presentation, average size baby, then she can have a vaginal delivery. Then comorbidities like chronic hypertension or severe PIH, pregnancy induced hypertension, or diabetes, these are all the relative indications. Pelvic atresia is also a relative indication. Then dystocia or dysfunctional labor, sometimes you may have to do the cesarean section, because if the cervix is not opening up, it's not dilating sufficiently, or there is a fetal distress along with that, or there is a persistent occipito-posterior position or deep transverse arrest, these are some of the other positions of the baby which is not possible to deliver vaginally. Face presentation with mento-posterior position, they need cesarean section. Then placental insufficiency, that means it is reflected as a fetal distress where you cannot keep the baby intrauterine for a longer time. Baby is having distress, asphyxia, you may urgently need to deliver the baby, then you have to do cesarean section. And a new indication is cesarean section on demand or maternal request. Sometimes the mother requests because possibly they are not able to withstand the stress of the labor, pain of the labor, and they want cesarean section. This is also a relative indication. As I have said, there are two types in classification: elective and emergency. So there are indications for elective and emergency sections also differ. Elective is a planned cesarean section, the scheduled cesarean section which is arranged in advance, and mostly it is arranged for some medical indications which have developed before, like diabetes or chronic hypertension, or during the pregnancy like pregnancy induced hypertension or GDM or gestational diabetes mellitus, or some other conditions. Maybe she is having fetal compromise, like baby is a severely IUGR baby and you feel the baby may not be able to withstand the stress of vaginal delivery, or as I said, mother's request. These are all done ideally after 39 weeks of gestation to reduce the chance of any respiratory distress syndrome. The emergency cesarean sections are the one where during labor we allow the mother for vaginal delivery. Actually, vaginal delivery is planned initially, but some indication for cesarean section develops during labor. So let us see some indications of emergency cesarean section. So emergency cesarean section: severe pre-eclamptic toxemia, where there is uncontrolled hypertension, or abruption occurs during labor, abruptio placentae, where the placenta, which is situated in the upper segment, gets separated from the uterine wall partially and leads to bleeding or distress. Then any fetal distress where you cannot wait for longer time for the baby to deliver. The baby's heart rate is dipping below 100 and is persisting for some time. So you don't want the baby, because baby can be asphyxiated, and the asphyxiated baby delivered vaginally also, it is going to have a bad effect. Remote may have epilepsy in the baby afterwards, or mental retardation. So such babies we better deliver urgently through abdominal route. Then there may be a failure to progress in the first stage of labor. Maybe in spite of strong contraction, there is no progress in the labor. There is no dilatation, no effacement, no descent. Then you have to take her for emergency cesarean section, because you can't allow the labor to go on for a very long time for the fear of developing infection, chorioamnionitis, and some other problems. Then in case of cord prolapse, suddenly there is a rupture of membrane, or even when you do artificial rupture of membrane with the gush of liquor, the cord also comes down and there is a very serious danger of cord getting compressed and baby getting asphyxiated. So in this case, we may have to do an emergency section. Then obstructed labor, as I said, there is incomplete rotation. In occipito-posterior position, the baby head has rotated only 45 degrees and it is now occipito-transverse and is not at all rotating further anteriorly. So this is a deep transverse arrest, or there is a big baby which is obstructing the labor. So obstructed labor also an indication for emergency section. Then failed induction is also very common indication nowadays. You have induced the labor for various reasons. It could be term pregnancy, or it could be oligohydramnios, or some other indications like there is GDM or diabetes mellitus or uncontrolled hypertension. So this induction is done, but there is no progress of labor. Then failed induction, you may have to do the cesarean section. And malpresentation like brow presentation, chin posterior and face presentation, shoulder presentation, compound presentation. Compound presentation is like two presenting parts like head with hand, or shoulder with cord, so compound presentation or a breech presentation, so you may need to do cesarean section. Then again, compromised fetus secondary to diabetes mellitus, hypertension, isoimmunization. As I told you, there is intrauterine growth restriction in the baby, or there is distressed baby. The biophysical profile is not good enough. There's not movements are reduced, or there are changes in the NST. There is reduced beat to beat variation. So all such compromised babies, you may have to do the cesarean section. And antepartum hemorrhage during labor, again you may have to do cesarean section. Now elective cesarean sections are the sections which are planned in advance. Here there are different indications. Here before only we decide that this is contraindicated for vaginal delivery. Like for example, there is a primary genital herpes in the 3rd trimester. There is no time for the development and transmission of maternal antibodies for the herpes simplex virus, which can cross the placenta and protect the baby. We don't want the baby to get infected by this herpes, so we'll go for elective cesarean section. Then placenta previa, there is a low-lying placenta where the placenta is near reaching internal os, or it is covering the internal os where vaginal delivery is not possible in central placenta previa, and even when it is reaching the internal os, it is quite dangerous, because as the progress goes and the lower segment is taken up, cervix dilates, then there is real danger of this low placenta separating from this lower segment, and it can lead to very heavy bleeding, and which can again compromise the baby as well as the mother's life. If there is a maternal diabetes, then baby is big, is more than 4.5 kg, we generally opt for the cesarean section. Then if the mother had a previous vaginal delivery with a major shoulder dystocia, then even this time we see the baby's weight and we may decide for elective section. Then previously, if the mother had vaginal delivery 3rd or 4th perineal tear which was repaired, then in this patient also we would like to decide about cesarean section, because again the vaginal delivery, there is a chance that again she may have this repair undone, again there may be a tear and there may be a rigid perineum, there may be a scar tissue which may not be very much amenable for vaginal delivery. And maternal choice is another new indication coming up. Sometimes the mothers, though everything is alright, baby is alright, pelvis is alright, and the uterine contractions are alright, pelvis is alright, passage is alright, that is passenger is alright, contractions are alright, but the mother is unable to bear the pain or the stress, and she may request for a cesarean section, and you may want to do cesarean section, sometimes even without the pain in advance. For the fear of pain, tocophobia, the mother may request even before going in the labor, and then you may have to do elective cesarean section. Mother's request may be elective or emergency cesarean section, both ways. So it could be for a breech at term, sometimes you plan cesarean section, sometimes the mothers don't want to take the risk. The family doesn't want to take the risk of the breech delivery. Then unstable lie, like oblique lie. Sometimes it is oblique, sometimes it is transverse, sometimes it's cephalic. Then there could be actually possible that there may be some congenital malformation like septate uterus, which is making this lie, which is unstable lie, and transverse lie. Then we may want to do the elective section. In twin pregnancies, when the first baby is not cephalic, in modern obstetrics, cesarean section is indicated for such babies, such pregnancy. Then maternal medical condition, I told you, baby may be having some cardiomyopathy, where it is dangerous for the mother to undergo labor, especially second stage, when there is much increase in cardiac output and there is lot of strain on the heart. then we go for a elective cesarean section. Then fetal compromise, as I told you, growth restriction and abnormal CTG, abnormal fetal Dopplers. So we can say sometimes oxytocin challenge test is done, and in that if you see that there is a compromise of the baby, fetal heart is not very good, so we decide for elective cesarean section. HIV I already told you. No, his herpes simplex is described, but even in HIV patient, poorly controlled, we would like to do elective section. So the elective cesarean sections are usually planned after 39 weeks of completion of pregnancy to reduce the chance of respiratory distress in the neonate. Because before that, baby is more prone for developing transient tachypnea of the newborn. And if you have to, for any reason, we have to do it before 39 weeks, we will give corticosteroid to the mother to make the respiration lungs more mature. That stimulates the development of surfactant in the fetal lung and reduces the chances of respiratory distress in the newborn. Now, once we have decided for the cesarean section, what is the pre-op preparation? For the pre-op preparation, we have to take a valid informed consent. Then injection, ranitidine or any antacid is given about half an hour before to prevent the stomach acidic juice, because if that is regurgitated, then it can develop into Mendelssohn syndrome if there is regurgitation of acid juice. So we make it non-acidic. So this is given. Then we give some antiemetic, metoclopramide, maybe 10 milligrams IV, or intramuscular also can be given half an hour, 1 hour before the procedure to again prevent the vomiting during the procedure and regurgitation. Then stomach should be empty. So in elective sections, we advise about 8 hours NPO. If it is emergency, sometimes we may have to empty the stomach by Ryle's tube. Then bladder should be also empty, it is catheterized. And just before we do the operation, we always confirm the fetal presentation, position, and of course fetal heart sound should be checked just before we start the operation on the OT table. Now the technique of the LSCS operation. The incision, this is one picture which shows the incision through the abdomen wall. Abdomen is open, skin is open, and then incision is taken on the lower segment of the uterus transversely, and you can see here baby is delivered. The surgeon's hand goes below the baby's head, and then baby's head is taken out. So the procedure is supine position is given, preparation is done, parts are prepared and draped, and type of incision, as I told you, you can take subumbilical, vertical right paramedian incision, or you take a horizontal incision on the lower abdomen of the skin, and then abdominal cavity is entered after cutting skin, subcutaneous fat and anterior rectus sheath, separating the rectus muscle, not cutting the rectus muscle, and then opening the parietal peritoneum, and you enter the abdominal cavity. Now we look for the bladder, and then we look for the loose fold of peritoneum on the lower segment of the uterus. This loose fold of peritoneum is picked up and cut transversely, and then bladder is pushed away from the lower segment of the uterus. The lower segment is now exposed, and on the lower segment generally again we take a horizontal incision and then open the uterus. Open the uterus, and then you can see the membranes. The membranes are punctured, the liquor starts draining out. Note the color of the liquor. Clear liquor means the healthy baby, but it could be meconium stain. Then baby may be compromised if it is thick meconium, or it could be sometimes blood stain in case of antepartum hemorrhage. So you take out the baby's head either with the hand manually or with the forceps. And once the baby's head is delivered, the baby is delivered, and then you have to deliver the placenta. Before that, you check for the pulsation, and sometimes people wait for the pulsation to stop to clamp the cords and cut the cord. Or in case of some conditions, we don't wait for the pulsation to stop, like in RH incompatibility or PIH. You immediately clamp the cord and cut it between the two clamps, and thereafter you deliver the baby's placenta. The placenta is delivered manually generally, and after the placenta is delivered, check that the uterine cavity is empty. Remove all the clots, and with the clean mop from inside remove the clots using the clean mop. And now we check the uterine angles for the incision. If there is any extension, then we have to close the uterus. Uterus is closed in different methods, sometimes in a single layer and sometimes in a double layer. Second layer above the first layer. Then peritoneum is closed. After that, you check the instruments, counts is done, so swabs are counted. Any blood clots from the perineal cavity are generally removed, and when the instrument and mop count, not swab, sorry, mop counts is correct, then you close the abdomen in layer. Peritoneum is closed. Then rectus muscles are just brought together with few stitches in the midline. Anterior rectus sheath is closed, and subcutaneous fat is closed, and the skin is closed. Inside the peritoneal cavity and rectus sheath, inside the cavity we use long delayed absorbable sutures like polyglactin, and anterior rectus sheath also with polyglactin or sometimes with prolene, and that is non-absorbable. And skin is also closed by monocryl or by using silk. So again, this is another same picture again, just to refresh. Abdomen is opened by low horizontal, then uterus is opened by horizontal incision, and the baby is delivered. What is the immediate post-op care? Immediately after surgery, the woman is shifted to recovery area and monitored. What do you monitor? You monitor that there is no excessive bleeding. You monitor that uterus is well contracted and is hard in consistency. Note down the level of the uterus, fundus of the uterus, because sometimes if the lady is bleeding inside the uterus, the fundal height will increase. So you have to note down the fundal height and note down the incision site that it is dry, there is no bleeding, and note down the, of course, pulse and blood pressure has to be noted. Temperature is noted once. Vital signs that is noted. Urine output is also checked. It should be adequate urine output. Adequate is 60 ml per hour, and sufficient just is the half of that, at least 30 ml per hour or half a ml per minute, and 1 ml per minute is adequate. Patient is also given pain medication, as some analgesics are given, maybe diclofenac sodium or maybe paracetamol. Initially, paracetamol can be given IV if you want, or diclofenac sodium can be given intramuscularly, and antibiotics are given orally. Thereafter she is shifted. Again, it is just monitor the patient for uterine atony, very important, because sometimes there is a silent bleeding inside the uterine cavity, and if not noted, patient can go in for shock. So it's very important to note oliguria if it is present, that indicates dehydration. So I said urine output monitoring is very, very important, and monitor the uterine fundal height, and monitor for revealed bleeding, excessive vaginal or bleeding from the incision. Then you have to check the blood pressure monitoring for hypotension or in case of hypertension, for hypertension also whether it is still hypertension, because accordingly you have to treat the patient. And analgesia, I have told you, sometimes they give opioid analgesia, can be pethidine can be given, or as I told you can give paracetamol or diclofenac sodium. And afterwards patient is shifted. Early ambulation is actually initially after the anesthesia is worn out, then you can tell the patient to move her legs. She can fold the legs and straighten the legs initially and take deep breaths. This is all to avoid thromboembolic phenomenon complication. And when possible she can turn in the bed, and she can be encouraged to give the breastfeeding in a cesarean section. Within 2 hours if she can latch the baby on the breast, then it is good. It's good for the baby, for baby bonding, for the lactation, and for so many other things like for involution, and for babies resistant to diseases, because baby will get antibodies. So early lactation should be advised. And oral intake generally next day after 10 to 12 hours, once the peristalsis is established, then only oral intake is advised. So this is the plan. Again in nutshell, the revision of the post-operative plan. Analgesia is given. Sometimes we give Zonac suppository per rectum on the operation table itself, that is diclofenac sodium suppository. And in the medication, antibiotics is for both aerobic and anaerobic is very important. We give metronidazole is given, and some other antibiotic can be given like cefotaxime. Initially it is given intravenous. Once the mother starts taking oral, maybe the next day we start on oral antibiotics. Sometimes in some women we have to give thromboprophylaxis like Plexin if they are really obese. And uterotonics are to be given. Definitely we have to give her oxytocin, 1 or 2 drips we give oxytocin, some 20 units or 40 units also can be given, no problem after delivery. And we have to catheter management, we have to see the urine output. And generally after 24 hours, unless there is a strong indication for continuing catheterization, after 24 hours we remove the catheter. And